Hello my friends, today I wanted to talk about emotional regulation, dysregulation, and the window of tolerance. And people talk a lot about emotional dysregulation being this problem or issue that we have, and emotional regulation being the solution. Like, we just need to regulate our nervous systems and then we can kind of, get on with our lives. And there's a lot of truth to that, but there are many nuances that I want to bring out in this video that aren't mentioned. So I want to give you an analogy for your emotional system, a very simple one at first, of a volcano. Your body, your nervous system is this big mountain, and at the core there is this roiling reservoir of hot magma. And this is the emotional wounds and traumas and things like that we're carrying, the emotional residue from our past. Every time you felt scared or shamed or sad, but you didn't have the support, you weren't able to really process it and be present with it, that's pushed down into the body, stored in this reservoir. And then when there are certain situations where a similar threat is perceived to when that emotional wound was created, then that magma will start to bubble and boil up to keep you safe. So, if you weren't listened to as a child, for example, that might create a wound of sadness and then some anger on top. And then if you perceive that your boss isn't really paying you attention in a kind of a vaguely similar way, it'll help if your boss reminds you of one of your parents, then it can bring up that same reaction. And now your volcano has a kind of a window of tolerance. Perhaps it can handle a certain amount of magma boiling up without exploding everywhere, right? There's a certain capacity it has. There's enough space within it to contain a certain amount of this hot magma. But at a certain point, if it gets too much, it'll tip over, and that's an eruption. Suddenly the magma, lava will start flowing out. There's black smoke everywhere, and this is the eruption. This is what you could call emotional dysregulation. Now, this analogy is quite dramatic. A little bit of emotional dysregulation is much less, being a bit sad or a bit angry and frustrated. It's not as dramatic, but just bear with me. It's just an analogy. So your window of tolerance in the nervous system, your own window of tolerance, is similar in that there is a certain amount of emotional intensity or activation that you can be present with, and it's okay for it to be there. What I mean for it to be okay is you can be present with it. It doesn't feel like you're tipping into kind of what I would call a survival state where you feel actively threatened. And you don't have to come up with coping mechanisms for dealing with your situation. So you don't have to turn to something external to you to try and cope with it. You don't have to control other people to try and cope with it. So we might have a drink just to calm down, or we might have to tell our partner, start controlling our partner so they stop triggering us because they're triggering us. So we want to control them so we can feel better. Or we might start thinking, I need to study harder, I need to work harder, because some shame starts coming up. These are all coping mechanisms that are signs we're starting to go outside of our window of tolerance. Just like a volcano that can't quite contain all that magma, that lava, it starts flowing out the top. Now, emotional regulation is when we start finding ways to just ease the intensity, the activation of the emotions within us. It's akin to the volcano. Maybe on the one hand, it tries to take the pressure off, to calm things down by releasing some gas from the sides. There's these holes in the sides of the mountain where gas can start to come out, and that can start to relieve some of the pressure so things calm down a little bit. That's one way that we can also do ourselves. That might be, we could do breathing techniques, or we could go do some yoga, or we could just bring some touch. When we bring our hands to our own body, it tends to regulate the nervous system. Or we can go the other way, which is where we almost try and numb out to it. We can dissociate, numb out, disconnect from the body, which would almost be akin to, like if you imagine putting boulders in the top of the volcano or partly blocking it up so that it kind of pushes the magma and the lava down, which at a much deeper level creates more pressure, but at the surface seemingly makes things okay for a while. And there's nothing wrong with that. And that's, an option that, you find in a lot of people. Certainly if there's a lot of magma lava coming up, sometimes that's the only option. The issue is that it tends to kick the can down the road, because you find that at a certain point, if there's a really big trigger, it almost keeps the pressure going really deep down. So then when the next trigger comes along, it might really blow the top off. So there's an interplay here between the trigger and the regulation and the dysregulation. And what we're always trying to do is regulate ourselves, right? Where, emotions start coming out, we're trying to go, okay, how can I get rid of this? Which is kind of like a volcano, the magma starts coming out. It's like, how can I squish this back down? Or how can I ease the pressure? The problem is neither of those are long-term solutions. Even if you're regulating yourself in a healthy way, if you're going to yoga every day and you're eating healthily, this is still essentially ways of just trying to keep that hot lava at bay, right? And it's not actually dealing with that hot lava. That's still the same amount of lava you've got down there. If anything, it's slowly accumulating, and at some point it's gonna blow. And it's just almost a question of when. When a sufficiently big trigger comes along, or just it keeps building up until it just naturally overflows. And you can do that for decades. And again, there's nothing wrong with that at all. But just there's a better option. What you actually want is to go towards emotional dysregulation, but in the right way, staying within your window of tolerance. This is the key. So we need to sort of be able to modulate the amount of dysregulation we're feeling so that we can handle it. So that it's almost like some of the lava, the magma, can come to the surface and it can just almost like calmly go down the sides of the mountain in a more controlled way, and it can start to cool down. It's not just spewing everywhere. That's way too much, right? So what we want to really do with emotions is learn to increase our capacity to be present with them. And every time you're feeling an emotion, that is dysregulation. Emotions are dysregulating to your nervous system. But that's okay. As long as you have enough capacity for it, that's great. This is also where resourcing comes in. I've got another video on that. Just search on my channel for resourcing. This is creating islands of safety in your experience, which is different techniques you can do to support your nervous system to be able to be more present. It's like temporarily just giving yourself a little bit more capacity. And as you sit with that emotional dysregulation, that's when you're able to be present with it. That's when you're processing the emotions and you're integrating them. It's allowing that lava and that magma to move through. And over time, you'll find that your window of tolerance can expand and can get bigger. So you can handle sort of bigger and bigger triggers and meet that energy and let it move through. And this depletes that reservoir at the core. That reservoir of magma starts to get less and less and less. And so there's just generally in your day-to-day life, in your system, you feel like there's less heat and smoke and all that stuff. You feel calmer just in your body in a very natural way. You're not trying to relax. There's just a natural relaxation that is present because there isn't all this bubbling lava underneath the surface, right? Now, how can you do that? Well, this is the kind of the work I offer with people, trying to support them to do this. In fact, I've got lots of techniques for this. If you check out my video, How to Feel Your Feelings, that goes into more detail of how to actually sort of do this work. But the main thing I wanted to get across here is that emotional regulation is not really the long-term goal for deep healing. You actually want to learn to meet emotional dysregulation. And the real marker of progress is not necessarily that you feel better from moment to moment, but that your window of tolerance is increasing. Your capacity to be present with emotional dysregulation in the body is increasing. That's a sign that you're really meeting yourself. And that's the capability that will allow you to meet these waves of lava as they're coming up, as they do in life, over and over. And that's where the transformation happens as well. That's what transforms you from a volcano to a mountain, just a calm, majestic mountain that's not gonna erupt and kill everybody around. Whatever. So check out those videos. If I remember, I will link them in the description. The How to Feel Your Feelings and the resourcing one. But that's what I wanted to share today. Just the importance of actually being able to meet dysregulation, the limits of regulating your emotions as a long-term strategy, and that the window of tolerance is the key to doing this in a way that's safe. And as you're doing this, if it starts getting too much, that volcano is getting too much, that's when you want to regulate, and you want to take a step back and regulate your nervous system, and then you can come and approach that particular emotion again another time. Good luck. See you later.